evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Biden gets a lot of pushback from Republican governors over his latest vaccine mandates, but a White House senior advisor says the president will run them over. People across the country are commemorating those who lost their lives in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The 20th anniversary is just one day away. Some Californians in the Bay Area say it's not worth recalling the governor, and a prominent candidate gets an egg thrown at him during his campaign. A sheriff calls it a hate crime. President Biden had a long phone call with Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping. This is his second time talking to Xi since taking office in January. President Biden's plan to coercively vaccinate tens of millions of Americans has gotten some pushback. Republican officials say they're already crafting their legal response. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Good evening, my fellow Americans.
President Biden unsealed his plan to mandate vaccines in the private sector with a message.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
He says this is about protecting yourself and those around you, but a volley of statements from at least 19 Republican governors contested the president's plan. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he issued an executive order protecting Texans' right to choose whether they get the COVID vaccine, calling Biden's plan an assault on private businesses. Here's the South Dakota governor on Fox News hours after Biden's speech.
So we will take action. My legal team is already working, and we will defend and protect our people from this unlawful mandate.
But President Biden doesn't appear fazed.
Have at it. Look, I am so disappointed that particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids, so cavalier with the health of their communities. We're playing for real here. This isn't a game.
White House senior advisor Cedric Richmond says Biden's willing to run over Republican governors who stand in his way. The vaccine mandate is expected to be issued through OSHA, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This agency sets health and safety rules for private businesses. The White House says unruly business owners could take some big hits.
If a workplace refuses to follow the standard, the OSHA fines can be quite significant. Enforcement actions can include fines up to $13,600 per violation.
We don't see much public support for Biden's plan from Democratic governors. Oregon's Governor Kate Brown was one of a few to thank Biden, saying this will help her vaccination efforts. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And NTD's Jason Perry spoke with the president and attorney of Advocates for Faith and Freedom to find out more about the constitutionality of President Biden's vaccine mandates.
No, I do not believe it is constitutional. I think it's serious federal overreach.
Robert Tyler has been practicing law for over 25 years. He said President Biden is bypassing the normal process that regulations are adopted.
This is a stretch of executive authority, not even congressional authority, where there's checks and balances and hearings and arguments and debate and a vote by our representatives. This is the President of the United States deciding unilaterally, as though he's a monarch or a dictator, deciding what's going to be permissible across all states of this great United States.
Tyler said without hearing from the experts and without being able to evaluate the science, the mandates would seem arbitrary and most likely lack sufficient standing in court. He gave this example.
Why is he choosing 100 and more employees? Because when you're looking at the theoretical risks of COVID within the workplace, it's going to be the same for a company who's 99 versus a company who's 101. But there's this arbitrary cutoff, and so that is one of the reasons why I think that this law is going to be deemed arbitrary and capricious and therefore unlawful under appropriate constitutional standards.
Tyler also said that a person who chooses not to get a vaccine is not harming a third party, and that everyone has the right to get a vaccine to protect themselves if they so choose. Jason Perry, NTD News.
So what's the word on the street? How are everyday Americans reacting to this new vaccine mandate? NTD's Phil Zhou went to downtown Manhattan to speak to people there.
New Yorkers are split on the new vaccine mandate. Acte Maldonado is a senior citizen. She's been working in the education system for over 40 years.
Acte, how do you feel about President Biden's latest vaccine mandate?
I'm all for the vaccine mandate. I work in a company that has over 1,000 employees, and they are mandating that if we want to go and work face to face, we must have the vaccine. I already have my 2 vaccines plus my booster. I am in the vulnerable population because I'm a senior citizen already.
She's recommending everyone to get the vaccine.
I have no concerns at all. Dr. Fauci is my Bible. Everyone should get the vaccine. I'm all for it. I got it and I'm still alive and no side effects.
But not everyone agrees.
I strongly disagree. I find it's highly unconstitutional, running afoul of many of the constitutional amendments from the Bill of Rights.
Patrick Kane works in security systems technology. He says the mandate might have an opposite effect.
This is not going to work out the way he wants to, and will actually cause more vaccine hesitancy.
Kane says it feels like he's being forced to get vaccinated, and he's not happy about it.
My company has well more than 100 employees, and so yesterday's edict affected me. I'm going to wait until my company officially orders the directive. That way, there's liability.
Marisol works in finance. She says there should be some exceptions.
I think if people really have medical issues or other personal issues, there's always a way to find exceptions.
Some say the vaccine should be a personal choice. Let people decide the future for themselves.
It's up to you, and we have to respect that too. You know, and they must have their reasons. Why?
It's really up to a person, so it's a kind of confusing when they say that.
Everyone is entitled to their doubts or whatever their, whatever the reason may be that they wouldn't want to get the vaccine, side effects being one of them.
Phil Zhou, NTD News.
On to vaccine booster shots. The Aztrazeneca vaccine's designer says antibodies are lasting well. So in her view, the booster isn't for everyone. Oxford University professor Sarah Gilbert tells The Telegraph that she isn't supportive of a widespread booster shot campaign in the UK. Gilbert says it makes sense to give a booster to people with weakened immune systems, like the elderly. But she opposes a boost all effort because antibodies are lasting well in most people. Gilbert also has called into question the push to vaccinate children because most of them are not at risk of death or hospitalization. Instead, she told the newspaper the focus should be on getting more vaccines into countries with low vaccination rates. Her scientific opinion is very different from medical agencies in the U.S., which call for children 12 and up to get vaccinated against COVID. And parents in Florida can now decide for themselves whether to mask their children when they're at school or not. Today, a Florida judge ruled in the governor's favor, allowing him to ban mask mandates in schools. The District Court of Appeals in Tallahassee issued this ruling, reversing a previous judge's ruling from just days earlier. On Wednesday, Judge John Cooper ruled that schools can mandate masks. He said Governor DeSantis' ban on masks was an executive overreach. This new ruling today reverses that, but not everyone is happy about it. Parents who filed the suit against DeSantis over the order plan to take the case to the Florida Supreme Court. Charles Gallagher, the lead attorney for the group of parents, said, quote, "With a stay in place, students, parents, and teachers are back in harm's way. But as for now, Florida's schools must leave it up to the parents whether to mask up their kids." And tomorrow marks the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Biden administration officials are commemorating and honoring those who lost their lives that day. Here's more on what the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have to say.
We come together first and foremost to honor the people we lost on that horrific day. Nearly 3,000 men, women, children in New York, in Arlington, in Shanksville.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the events of 9/11 showed the risks that many are willing to take to save the lives of complete strangers.
9/11 was, to understate one of the darkest days in our history, But out of it also came these demonstrations of profound humanity, compassion, strength, and courage. Above all, it showed our remarkable resilience.
Blinken says maybe more than any other event in our lifetime, 9/11 shaped the trajectory of our country and how we engage in the world. Moving forward, the Secretary of State promises to more effectively tackle the challenges that America faces today and to try to see around the corner to the crises and challenges of tomorrow.
Are we making our nation safer, more secure? Are we advancing our interests? Are we living up to our values? Are we focusing too much on some threats and not enough on others? Are we missing opportunities?
And in the courtyard of the Justice Department, Attorney General Merrick Garland commemorated the tragic event. In the courtyard stands a Callery pear tree. It's a descendant of a tree at Ground Zero that became known as the Survivor Tree after standing through the terror attacks at the World Trade Center.
The tree we are standing before is a living symbol of our values and our refusal to bend in the face of terrorism. It embodies our nation's spirit of hope and health and strength and resilience in the wake of the attacks.
Garland announced that he is permanently installing a plaque commemorating 9/11. Then Attorney General Loretta Lynch first dedicated this plaque in 2016.
The plaque reminds us that the threats from foreign terrorists like those involved in September 11th is one we must constantly guard against.
The Attorney General also promises to protect Americans from terrorism. He says his department will learn from the past to better anticipate and prepare for the next threat and seek to disrupt it.
When the World Trade Center was attacked, some 750 members of the New York City Fire Department plunged into the towers and the neighboring area for search and rescue. They paid no mind to the destruction raining down in Lower Manhattan. Only about half survived the day. Here's Commissioner Dan Nigro.
We had no idea how many people were actually in the towers. The estimate was between 25 and 50,000. Ultimately, 750 members of the fire department responded, and their job was to evacuate as many people as possible, and we did evacuate thousands. But before we could get everyone out of that building, we ran out of time, and 343 of our members were lost, almost half of those who responded that day. Besides the recovery effort there, which was a tremendous undertaking to actually dig out and sift 17-acre site that had collapsed, searching for every possible victim we could recover, we had to have funerals and memorial services almost every day for these 343 members to honor their families, and we did that. It was not easy, it was not pleasant, but it was required. And I'm very proud that the department was able to treat each and every one of them as an individual and conduct a department funeral as we should and a memorial. We're known as the bravest, and there's a reason for that. You can go upstairs from where we are now and see the memorial wall there and the hundreds and hundreds of names going back to 1865 of men and women who've put the sake of others in front of their own safety and have died in doing so. So that day was the epitome of bravery for this department and will forever be that. Members of the fire department swear an oath when we're brought into the department, as I was almost 52 years ago, to protect life and property, to put ourselves in harm's way for the sake of others. And that's what our members did initially. And after the buildings came down, we still had hopes of rescuing people who had survived the collapse. And our members immediately went to work what they pledged to do. And we continued at that site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a rescue and then recovery effort until May of 2002.
And the firefighters who lost their lives on 9/11 are not forgotten. A group of cyclists rode all the way from the Bay Area and California to New York City to honor them. The trip took a total of 40 days. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
This group of 10 biked 3,600 miles from the Bay Area, California to Brooklyn, New York, all to honor the firefighters who lost their lives on 9/11, trying to save others, and to bring communities together in their memory. The group, called Bay to Brooklyn, is made up of 8 active and retired firefighters and 2 military veterans. They reached their destination Tuesday afternoon after 40 grueling days on the road. Retired firefighter and group organizer Daryl Sales says keeping the firefighters' memory alive is personal.
We're part of a brotherhood and sisterhood in the fire service that is pretty universal throughout the world. And you can go anywhere and know that you're a part of a family. And so on 9/11, when those 343 firefighters died, we lost family members.
To honor the families who lost loved ones, the wife of one of the firefighters also joined the first 2 days of the ride.
I decided to ride because I wanted to represent the wives and families that are at home and those that did not get to have their significant other return home from 9/11.
The riders said they faced many challenges along the way, from weather conditions to fatigue to rugged and steep terrain.
And I can tell you, when you're climbing a 22-degree incline, there's a major temptation to get off and walk.
This father and son encouraged each other along the way, but one thought pushed them through.
When I thought that things were hard for me, I would try to remember the 343 firefighters that, gave their lives that day on 9/11, that they ran up the stairs into the towers doing their jobs, and they didn't get to go home. They didn't get to go home and see their kids. And so for me, it's like, no, I might think that I'm suffering, but I can push through this because of their sacrifices.
They said the overwhelming support from the communities they traveled through also motivated them to keep going.
What really did it for me is all the communities that we went through, these little communities in the United States, had memorials, these beautiful memorials that honored our true American heroes.
Reflecting on the bravery and sacrifice of the 9/11 first responders, we asked them what it means to be a firefighter.
To be a firefighter to me is to go and help people on their worst day.
For Dewey Ray, who was a firefighter for 40 years, it means selflessly serving your community.
I had good leaders, I had good trainers who instilled that into me. So every day that I came to work, I was there to be of service. And they really impressed upon me that today doesn't belong to you. Today belongs to the people that you serve. Everything you do today should be focused on the people that you serve.
The writers say they hope Americans can come together on 9/11 and share the fallen heroes' message of sacrifice and caring for your fellow countrymen. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
New York City is preparing for the annual 9/11 commemoration ceremony tomorrow. NTD's Arian Pazdar has details of the event and more.
The eyes of the world will be set right here tomorrow on the One World Trade Center. Now the ceremony there will have less invited guests than it usually does, and that's most likely because tomorrow marks exactly 20 years since the attacks. Only family members of victims are invited to the ceremony at the 9/11 memorial this year. The event is always closed to the public, but people can gather in the surrounding areas to join the events, which will start at 8:45 a.m. and end at around 12:30 p.m. The names of victims will be read aloud and moments of silence will be held. If you're not in New York City, you can follow the live stream of the ceremony at 911memorial.org. The governor and the mayor met at the NYPD headquarters for a security briefing on 9/11 on Friday.
There are no specific and credible threats directed against New York City at this time. And the NYPD is watching not daily, not hourly, minute by minute.
However, the city will still ramp up security forces.
You'll see individuals with long arms. You'll see them looking a little bit militarized. But the idea is to let anyone know that you mess with New York, there'll be consequences.
The Secretary of Homeland Security said they are not worried about Islamic terrorist groups.
We are focused on the domestic violent extremist, the individual who is radicalized by an ideology of hate or false narratives spread on social media.
A few weeks ago, Homeland Security sent out a message saying potential terror threats include people who oppose COVID measures or believe former President Trump could be reinstated. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
The University of Michigan is going big for this year's 9/11 anniversary. The marching band will pay tribute to those who lost their lives and were impacted by the tragedy. The band's director says the halftime show will be unprecedented in its scope. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the story.
We Remember. That's the name of this year's halftime performance by Michigan's marching band to honor those affected by the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
It is going to be a pretty spectacular show, and to my knowledge, this has never been done before by any college band or any band really in the world, and especially all at once.
The 10-minute show will feature all 400 of the school's band members carrying a light, and over half of them will also twirl batons, spin flags, or play instruments. We hear from a senior drum major from Grand Rapids who was 2 years old at the time of the attacks.
But I have heard that as tragic as that day was, those weeks and months ahead was unity, right? Unity across the entire country. And so we will try our best to pay tribute to that, to honor them, but to also generate that sensation of unity again.
The show will take place during Saturday's game against the University of Washington. It will be in Michigan Stadium, called the Big House, which sits just over 100,000 fans. The stadium will be lit up with lasers and ultraviolet light, and band members will carry glowing orbs like you see here, illuminated umbrellas, other lights, or high-powered flashlights.
You're going to want to hold it above your head, because if you hold it here, the light is going to go here.
A donation from Michigan band parents Bill and Janelle Sykes is making it possible. And the director says it's going to be Michigan's version of a Super Bowl halftime show and more.
It's going to be a celebration of a resiliency and strength and unity of the American people.
The celebration will come 20 years to the day after the 9/11 terror attacks killed thousands of Americans. Michigan's band paid tribute just a few days after it happened on short notice, but this time they had over 6 months to prepare. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Larry Elder, one of the forerunners in California's upcoming recall election, had an egg thrown at him this week. A county sheriff calls it a hate crime, and we hear from some locals on what they think about the recall. NTD's David Lamb reports.
This recall is approaching fast with an election date of next Tuesday. Now, there's been a lot of recall rallies to push the governor out of California, but today, Silicon Valley residents told us a different opinion.
I haven't voted yet. I have not sent in my ballot. I have it at the house. I've liked what he's done so far. However, there is some very, very strong points of argument regarding the homelessness, regarding the his need for flair.
I already voted as soon as the ballot came out. I think it was a waste of money. He only had 1 year left.
I understand, Gavin Newsom definitely did something that's just not making sense or not reasonable, but I don't think that leads to the recall. A lot of the stuff that he did, for example, going to a restaurant, it's supposed to be everyone's supposed to be locked out, and all those things are just pretty stupid, idiotic move.
Some residents told NTD that they weren't confident in voting for the other candidates. Earlier this week, Republican gubernatorial candidate Larry Elder was harassed by 10 people when he toured Venice Beach. Twitter footage shows that one lady in a gorilla mask threw an egg at Elder, missing his head. The Los Angeles County Sheriff on Thursday called this attack a hate crime. He said the woman may get away due to woke privilege. Twitter footage shows that one of his staff walked towards the lady. She slaps him while another protester hits him. After the incident, Elder, age 69, stated on Twitter, "The intolerant left will not stop us. We will recall Gavin Newsom. We will save California." According to state information, there have been 55 attempts to recall a California governor, and only one has been successful 18 years ago. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
On Thursday, 3 waste disposal companies in San Francisco were charged with bribery. They agreed to pay $36 million in fines. NTD's Eileen Ang has more details.
3 San Francisco garbage companies were charged with conspiracy and dishonest services. Collectively called the SF Recology Group, investigators found that they spent over $900,000 to bribe Mohammed Nuru, the former SF Department of Public Works Director and the group's regulator. They provided him with financial contributions, services, and gifts in exchange for Nuru favoring the group's business and contracts with the city from 2014 through the end of 2019. Bribes include giving Nuru $150,000 per year, $60,000 to fund his annual holiday bash, a job for his son in the SF Recology Group, and a 2-night stay at a New York hotel with other city officials that totaled to be over $800 per room. According to one FBI agent, SF Recology Group prioritized money over the trust of their customers. The FBI remains committed to seeking out instances of public corruption and holding those who violate federal law accountable for their actions. Recology agreed to pay $36 million in criminal penalties. In addition, they must cooperate with investigations, implement a compliance program, and provide annual reports to the U.S. Attorney's Office. In March, Recology was accused of overcharging customers after City Attorney Dennis Herrera investigated the case. It saved San Francisco residents over $100 million in garbage fees. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Did water once flow on Mars? And was it the home to ancient microbial life? NASA scientists may be able to answer these questions soon. For the first time ever, rock samples from Mars will be brought to Earth for analysis. Let's take a look.
Earlier this month, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance collected the first 2 rock samples that will ever be brought to Earth. The rocks come from an ancient Martian lake bed in a wide basin known as the Jezero crater.
You know, at NASA, we get to see a lot of things that rewrite the history books. This is the first time we have ever collected a sample of a rock from another planet with the intention to bring that sample back to Earth where we can analyze it.
NASA scientists can learn much from the samples. For example, about ancient volcanic activity in the area, what the climate was like on Mars billions of years ago, and even evidence of ancient life. Right now, they tentatively interpret that the rocks came from ancient lava flows.
Volcanic rocks have the potential to tell us about the interior and interior workings of planets and are particularly good for providing the ages of rocks. They show signs for sustained interaction with groundwater. If these rocks experienced water for long periods of time, there may be habitable niches within these rocks that could have supported ancient microbial life.
NASA scientists also found salts in the samples. Salts are great minerals for preserving signs of ancient life on Earth. So the scientists expect the same may be true on Mars.
We can look at the composition and look for tiny inclusions, such as tiny inclusions of liquid bubbles or bubble fluids inside of salts.
That would give NASA scientists a glimpse of the Jezero crater at the time when it contained water that could sustain ancient Martian life. NASA plans to collect as many as 43 mineral samples there over the next few months.
Coming up, President Biden talked with China's Xi Jinping for 90 minutes over the phone yesterday. Key issues they discussed include the economy, climate change, and the pandemic. And France's former health minister has been indicted for allegedly mishandling the pandemic. The decision comes after an investigation was launched, brought on by thousands of complaints filed against the government. This and more on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
President Biden had a phone call with Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping for the second time since taking office. Xi seems to see hope now, following what was a difficult period between the two powers.
U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the phone for about 90 minutes on Thursday. It's the second time the two leaders have spoken since Biden took office in January. Both agreed for the need to avoid letting competition between the world's 2 largest economies veer into conflict. A senior U.S. official said the conversation focused on economic issues, climate change, and COVID-19. A White House statement described the discussion as broad and strategic. Chinese state media, for its part, said it was candid and in-depth, adding that President Xi said U.S. policy on China imposed great difficulties on relations between the two. Ties between Washington and Beijing have been at their lowest point in decades. The two sides have been at loggerheads over a range of issues from human rights to climate change and transparency over the origins of the pandemic. The Biden administration has signaled that its recent withdrawal from Afghanistan will give the U.S. the space to focus on more pressing threats stemming from the communist regime. Meanwhile, Beijing has been quick to seize on the U.S. failure in Afghanistan to try to portray Washington as a fickle partner.
And even though both Xi Jinping and some on Wall Street may see the talk as a sign of reduced tensions between the U.S. and the Chinese regime, it may not be that simple. An analyst explains.
One of the main purposes of this talk is to reestablish a certain level of communication or contact between the two sides.
But NTD's China Affairs analyst Tang Jingyuan believes such communication does not mean the two sides' tensions are easing.
On the contrary, I think it indicates that in the near future, the competition and conflict may, in many areas, become more intense.
Hours after President Biden hung up the phone, news outlets reported that his administration is considering launching an investigation into China's state subsidies that give their companies unfair trade advantages. The investigation is reportedly to be conducted under Section 301 of the U.S. trade law. The law allows the U.S. government to respond to unfair practices that hurt American businesses. Former President Donald Trump launched a similar investigation under the law before firing off his trade war against China. Tang argued the phone call could be compared to an announcement before a car speeds up, telling the passengers to buckle up for the rocky road ahead.
It means that both sides have agreed to manage the risk and avoid direct armed conflict between them.
Meanwhile, Biden recently confirmed that he will attend an in-person meeting with the leaders of the Quad. The group is made of the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. It's designed to check the Chinese regime's aggression in the Indo-Pacific and has been compared to the NATO of Asia. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
In France, a former health minister has been indicted for allegedly mishandling the COVID-19 crisis. The decision comes after an investigation was launched by a special French court specializing in misconduct by government ministers. This as thousands of complaints are being filed against the government over the pandemic. NTD's David Vives has the story.
Former French Health Minister Agnès Buzyn has been indicted by a special court for alleged pandemic mismanagement at the beginning of 2020. The Republic's Court of Justice charged her with endangering the lives of others. Buzyn can appeal the charge, but if she's unsuccessful, she may face a sentence. Though there have been investigations in other countries over violations committed by authorities during the crisis, one law professor says this case is unprecedented.
France is the only country to name and implicate a minister for acts that have been committed with regard to pandemic management.
Some complaints against Buzyn are directed toward her attitude, such as discouraging people from wearing a mask or saying there was no risk of the virus reaching France. The minister's case may be the first in a series of judicial proceedings. According to a top prosecutor, there have been over 14,000 complaints against the government's handling of the pandemic in France, including most recently a group of doctors who filed complaints against the government over the vaccine mandate. Dr. Denis Agri, who worked in a hospital, says the mandate is against the law.
I'm calling on healthcare workers in hospitals to tell their bosses that the vaccine mandate is a form of discrimination based on health condition, which is punishable by 3 years of jail time and a €45,000 fine.
Agret said a court decision is only the first step.
I hope the police and judges do their work and investigate. We doctors want to work without the mandate.
The health minister did not comment on the special court's decision. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Life is back to normal in Denmark. The country is lifting all domestic pandemic restrictions, which have lasted nearly 550 days. It's one of the first European Union countries to do so. As of today, a digital health pass showing proof of vaccination is no longer required to enter any venues, including nightclubs. The easing of restrictions came gradually, with bars, restaurants, gyms, and salons already dropping the digital pass at the beginning of the month. And the mask mandate for public transportation ended even earlier in August. In a statement on August 27th, the Danish health minister said the epidemic is under control. Official figures indicate that 70% of Danes over the age of 15 have been fully vaccinated. Denmark's neighboring Sweden, which took a more lax approach in pandemic management, also said it would lift most domestic restrictions on September 29th. And the leaders of Russia and Belarus on Thursday agreed to set up a unified oil and gas market and to deepen economic integration. It's the latest show of support by Putin for Lukashenko, who faces Western sanctions. On the same day, the two allies launched joint military exercises. NTD's Eddie Aitken tells us more.
The presidents of Russia and Belarus said on Thursday they have made significant progress in integrating their countries' economies. This includes forming common energy and financial markets. The moves would bolster Belarus as it faces Western sanctions imposed in response to political repression after a contested presidential election last year. Putin and his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko, at their meeting in Moscow, announced their approval of 28 programs strengthening integration. The programs fall under a 1999 union agreement that calls for close political, economic and military ties but stops short of a full merger. Russia has buttressed Belarus's economy with cheap energy supplies and loans. The Belarusian opposition is concerned that Lukashenko will trade off chunks of sovereignty in return for more backing from the Kremlin against the West.
We will do anything in the interests of our people. And if we need a closer military, political, any other direction, economic integration, we will do it immediately, as soon as we feel the demands of our people in Belarus and Russia.
Russia sees the ex-Soviet republic as a strategically important buffer to its west. The talks came on the same day that Russia and Belarus began military exercises involving some 200,000 servicemen. The week-long drills on Russia's and Belarus's western flanks and in the Baltic Sea have alarmed some NATO countries. Moscow released footage of warships and tanks opening fire and fighter jets taking off.
These drills are not targeted at anyone, but they are logical in conditions when other alliances, such as NATO, are actively increasing their military presence.
NATO said it will be watching closely. The drills include 2,500 Russian troops sent to Belarus. After large demonstrations broke out in Belarus in August 2020 over the election widely seen as rigged, Russia said it would be willing to send troops if the country requested them. Belarus authorities have arrested and imprisoned prominent opposition figures and closed many independent media outlets.
Alexander Lukashenko spoke about the internal political situation in the Republic of Belarus, which has noticeably stabilized.
Putin added Russia would provide Belarus with around £450 million in loans by the end of 2022. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Russian energy giant Gazprom said today it had finished construction of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to Germany. The pipeline will double Russia's gas exporting capacity to Europe via the Baltic Sea, and it will allow Moscow to circumvent its political foe Ukraine as a major route for its lucrative gas exports. Gazprom started the construction of the 750-mile-long pipeline from Russia to Germany 5 years ago. The progress of the project was halted in 2019 when the U.S. Congress and then U.S. President Trump imposed sanctions against it. The project has drawn criticism from the U.S. and Ukraine, among others, over concerns Russia might use the pipeline as a geopolitical weapon. Russia said on Thursday pumping gas via Nord Stream 2 would not start until a German regulator gives the green light. And Airtankers skimmed water from the sea on Friday to battle a wildfire near a popular resort in southern Spain. The blaze has forced over 1,000 people out of their homes and killed an emergency worker.
Since erupting on Wednesday evening, the blazes burned through nearly 8,900 acres of forest near Estepona, a Mediterranean resort favored by tourists and retirees.
The wildfire is alive. Today is a complex day due to the meteorological conditions. It is one of the most complicated wildfires in the past years in Andalusia because of the orography, the temperature, and the relative humidity.
Footage showed firefighting planes scooping water from the sea as beachgoers sunbathed on the seashore.
We're not too worried. I think it's under control. We've seen the planes, we've seen fires here before, in fact closer to us before, so we're okay. We're not too badly affected. It would not stop us coming back to this beautiful area, which we love.
A spokesperson for the regional fire brigade said authorities were planning to bring in 2 more planes and a helicopter to battle the wildfire, bringing the total aircraft deployed up to 69. But he said the flames were unlikely to be brought under control until Saturday. The regional environment chief said the blaze appeared to have been started deliberately, and investigators were working to uncover more details. Just over 1,000 people have been evacuated from the area, and a 44-year-old firefighter died on Thursday night.
Up next, one of the most famous pieces from the golden age of Dutch painting, girl reading a letter at an open window. Visitors can now see it in its original composition for the first time in Dresden, Germany. And a special variety of apple from Russia is ready to amaze you. The unique fruits are the size of a pearl, but taste just as good as the full-size version. Find out more here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Fans of the golden age of Dutch painting will be happy to hear about a new exhibition. Germany's largest exhibition on Dutch painter Johannes Vermeer is opening its doors. Let's take a look.
In the German city of Dresden, visitors are able to see one of Johannes Vermeer's most famous paintings in its original composition for the first time. Art authorities from around Europe worked on its restoration starting in 2017.
This spring, we met with experts from Vienna, Amsterdam and Copenhagen to discuss the concept of this restoration. We received a wide range of ideas that needed to be taken into account during the restoration.
Vermeer created the painting Girl Reading a Letter at an Open Window between 1657 and 1659. During the restoration, restorers discovered that the overpaint in the background was not done by Vermeer himself, so they worked carefully to remove the overpaint and revealed a painting within a painting. Where it used to be a brown wall, now stands a Cupid.
This great success of scientists and restaurateurs is the result of outstanding teamwork in European cooperation. In connection with an experts commission and over several years, the painting's original condition was restored at the workshop.
The Dresden State Art Collections, which is the museum system that houses this painting, had been closed for 7 years for restoration. It reopened February last year.
When the painting gallery Old Masters and the Sculptures collection dating up to 1800 was reopened on February 28, 2020, not just the people of Dresden were overjoyed.
But soon after, it had to close its doors again due to the pandemic. Now visitors can see the Vermeer exhibition from September 10th to January 2nd next year.
Documentary The Lost Leonardo and select UK art house cinemas from today charts the incredible story of the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. It includes the disputed claim of whether it really is the work of Leonardo da Vinci. NTD's Neil Woodrow meets the film's director.
This is the most improbable story that has ever happened in the art market. It's not even a good painting.
The Lost Leonardo is the inside story behind the Salvator Mundi, or Saviour of the World, the most expensive painting ever sold. The painting, discovered in a poor state, was bought for £900 in a New Orleans auction house in 2005. As a world-renowned art restorer works on the painting, she discovers brushstrokes she believes to be by the great master Leonardo da Vinci. The wheels are set in motion and the painting sells for over £320 million. As its price soars, so do questions about its authenticity. I spoke with the film's director, Andreas Kofod, who spent 3 years on the project. Did the finished film reflect well your initial motivations for making the film?
Yeah, I think so. It's been quite a journey to make it. It has taken 3 years, and we have interviewed, I think, around 35 people. We have been on maybe 20 trips to different places. So it's been like a huge nut to crack. And
Kofod said there are a lot of important themes in the story.
Themes around the truth and the whole art market, and also about the human psyche, about our inner longings, and the way we look at art and let our souls be reflected in the art and so on. So I think it had so many layers, and I hope that the film still has all those layers. I think it has.
Andreas says it's extraordinary how the painting was discovered and, despite the lack of provenance, sells 12 years later for a record-breaking sum.
And then on the top of that is the whole authenticity question. Is it a real Leonardo or not? And how do you actually determine that? And it turned out that there are basically two different groups of Leonardo scholars. One that thinks that it is a Leonardo, and the other one that is very skeptical.
The film is released in the UK Friday. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
A Russian gardener has grown an unusual type of fruit. They taste like apples, but are only the size of pearls. Let's take a look.
Small enough to fit in a matchbox, these tiny fruits are still called apples. They grow in Yakutsk, the coldest large city on the Siberian permafrost.
It's crunchy like an apple and tastes just like an apple. A bit sour still, just like this.
Back in Soviet times, local biologists developed this new breed of dwarf apples. By reducing their size, they're able to withstand extremely low winter temperatures.
My parents went to Prokofkas to visit a relative, and they asked for a seedling of this frost-resistant dwarf apple tree. It was grafted onto a wild apple tree and became frost-resistant. It withstands temperatures of under 60 degrees Celsius.
Based on the plant's appearance, it looks more like decoration than a fruit tree. The Russian gardener says he had tried making jams with the miniature apples, but explains harvesting them requires a lot of effort. So now he only eats them by the handful.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.